I'm Abbie Hamilton. I have been in gaming since the days of Oculus. So I actually got my gaming start running diversity, equity, and inclusion and events for Oculus once upon a time when it was Oculus and Facebook. And then, basically just kind of continued on that trajectory of gaming. Also basically ran DEI and also events as well for the gay gaming professionals for nearly a decade. And we've been pretty much well into year 2 of me being co-founder of AAPI in gaming. Just have continued on to this path of marrying my love of producing events and experiences, as well as my love, and passion for gaming and just really being, a voice for the gaming industry as well. But also my background has been in hospitality for about 17 years. And I also am a decade into basically managing social media and marketing for an EDM artist by the name of Troy Boy. I love the fact that this podcast talks about gaming and music and digital
Yeah,
creativity.
we all about it. Yeah, definitely fit right in with all the things that you do for sure. So how did you get started? So what was your come up, your start, as it were?
It's so interesting because I was just talking about kind of my origin story on hospitality the other day. And I
shout
feel
out
like
to the hospitality. I've worked numerous hotels. I know how it goes. So I'm very much aware of that life for sure.
Definitely. I feel like we all just kind of get our start just kind of out of nowhere sometimes, right? It might be just someone having a really innocent conversation with you about how maybe organized you are or how you delivered, a program or maybe an activation super successfully, and you have zero background in, what could be your potential career path. So I feel like that's kind of where I fell into place for hospitality. I literally had a friend who was like, "Hey, you seem super organized with your file folders and, the way you kind of do timelines and things like that. How'd you like to plan my wedding?" And it was just so
Wow.
random,
Okay.
right? Super random. And I say that because again, it just comes out of just having that conversation. And then I think that's also kind of how it happened with, Oculus. So I was obviously in the thick of being in my hospitality career, and then events and all of these things started coming up. And I believe there was a recruiting agency. God, I don't even remember their name. My bad. They reached out and said that they were looking for someone to basically help out with diversity, equity, and inclusion at Oculus in terms of programs and events. And so shout out to my incredible mentor. And she was one of the most phenomenal female leaders I ever had, Ebony Pay Ramirez, who actually gave me my start. She was OG Oculus. And so she was obviously in that role. I got brought in, I want to say 3 to 4 months into my role, she actually bowed out from her position to pursue other opportunities or whatever. Basically started heading up all these events and activations and experiences with all these amazing underrepresented communities. Kind of how that opened up the door to work with gay gaming professionals. And that was a decade of working very closely with them, helping out with their activations, experiences, programs. And then once I left Oculus, Facebook, because of, reorgs and things like that, I stayed on with GGP. And then it opened up so many additional, kind of opportunities, with Lesbians Who Tech, with GLAD, with I could name so many different organizations that we worked with, Trevor Project. And again, it just kind of opens up my mind and my heart to really understanding all different kinds of underrepresented communities. And yeah, just, I knew that gaming was definitely something that I was passionate about ever since I was at a young age. Gaming has kind of been a part of the household. It's been part of the life. It's been a really great way to manage also mental health and well-being. Also built that, camaraderie in that community. So it's just something that's stuck with me. And then again, 2 years in with, AAPI and gaming, we basically decided that we wanted to represent that particular community, in gaming. But then it didn't stop at gaming, because I don't need to tell everyone that gaming has become a little bit unsteady. And so, people who still have that passion and still have that love for that particular community, if they're not in gaming, what community did they belong to? And we basically wanted to create the statement that just because you're not a part of gaming per se, like in your title, does not mean that you are not a part of that community. So
Right.
then we kind of opened it up to anyone in tech, honestly. So AAPI in gaming was obviously the name of our organization, but we really opened it up to whoever still has a love
Hmm.
for gaming or still feels very much a part of that community. Come on and join us. It's been amazing. And this past GDC, we actually collaborated with Black in Gaming and Latinx in Gaming and created a whole new initiative called
Hmm.
Control Unite.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it was a separate initiative and kind of mission that we wanted to kind of take off site from GDC and to create, a space where game developers could showcase their games, where people could talk about their love of games. We also talked about the love of food, with all of our cultures like combined, the love of gathering, the art of gathering, and just, yeah, just being like that powerhouse kind of community where we can say that just because we are this background, this culture, or anything, it doesn't mean that it just stops here. Like we
Right.
wanted to
Right.
open
Right.
it up to whoever needed that love of community.
What was the landscape like before you kind of started putting on a lot of the events and meeting a lot of the communities and stuff like that? Like, was it just simply not enough events? Was it like just people not necessarily knowing where to go as far as, where their crowd was? Like, what was sort of the landscape around it?
So to be honest with you, I think the landscape was always like there. Like there's events, everywhere, but I think that it's just a matter of actually amplifying those voices, right? So it's actually like being able to say like, hey, this particular community is struggling and, maybe we should collaborate with, this said community or whatever to kind of like bring those two, communities together to basically have a common goal. So I think that there's very much like these events and experiences like everywhere. It's just a matter of how accessible were they? How defined they were and how was it something that could really be impactful for not just the now but also the future. And I think
Yeah.
that that was something that I personally wanted to, be a part of is being a part of the solution, being a part of that
Yeah.
like being a table where you can make these positive changes and actually using the power for good. I kind of see it again. This is like kind of like the geeky side of me, but I kind of see it as kind of like being part of the Avengers, but everyone has their, superhero power and they have like what their aim is, like what's their direction. However, being at this table doesn't mean you just sit back and you just kind of like let things, pan out. You actually sit there and you say like, where can I basically use my power and my voice for good without taking away from all the different voices that are also raising their hand saying like, hey, we have a problem. We need a solution. What do we got? And
Yeah.
I think that that's something that has been super near and dear to me with everything that I've been doing for the past like few years with some amazing people like backing me. I mean, I've seen some of them are guests like on your show in the past. So shout
Yeah.
out to like Carl Bernardo, shout out to Professor, Lindsay Grace, shout out to Trinidad, to Elaine, to just like so many people who have spearheaded so much of like what I know and what I love about this industry and this community.
This podcast is sort of in that same vein of trying to, just sort of help further the community as far as gaming and all of the different, elements that we get to touch. And like you said, I've gotten to interview a few people, in Black and Gaming, for example, and the different communities. And so I do think that's important, that everybody has that voice, has their own sort of, I guess, attachment to the community in some
Yeah.
form or fashion. So I think that is pretty cool. As far as games, so you say you're a big gamer, and obviously you've gamed your whole life. So what is your flavor? Are you like what are you playing? What was sort of the, I guess, the games that kind of kickstarted your gaming journey, as it were?
Gosh, okay, so I'm probably dating myself with all of this, but, like, my first, like, gaming system that I can probably even think of is, like, an Atari, you know
There
what I
you
mean?
go.
And I think I had, like, a friend who had, like, a Socrates or something, like, you know what I mean? So, like, I'm taking it, like, way back, but, like, one of my favorite games growing up was actually Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Huh, okay.
Okay, and so this explains my life to a T, by the way, on why I love that game then and why I wish someone would bring it back, like, now. I love the fact that Carmen Sandiego was, like, this badass female. She had, like, an awesome, like, trench coat, awesome hat, and she was
Yeah,
traveling to all these places and spaces, and, I think there was, like, a little element of sometimes maybe true crime in it, obviously
yeah,
as a kid, that's
uh-huh.
the version of true crime.
Well, didn't they have a I'm trying to think, was there, like, an animated series, that came out, like, later of that game at all?
Yes, but honestly, like, no offense, but, like, I
I
didn't
was gonna
feel
say,
like
I thought I remembered that at some point,
yeah,
yeah.
there was, but it didn't capture me the way that the classic,
Okay,
like,
gotcha.
video game, like, honestly, like,
You're gonna
captured
say, "I'm gonna look that up real
yeah,
quick ju
I
while you
know, and, like,
talking about
if there's anyone out there who wants to bring back, like, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, please do. Please do. Let's put together a focus group and make it happen. I just
Okay,
love the
yeah,
fact
so
that she traveled to places that I had only dreamed
gotcha,
or heard
yeah,
of, you know what I mean? Like, and so
mhm,
it was just cool to actually see her do those things. And then also, obviously, all the Super Mario Brothers,
mhm,
Donkey Kong was also my
there you
jam,
go,
Space Invaders.
yeah,
And then, fast forward a little bit later, and I love the things that were so much more interactive, like Dance Dance Revolution,
okay, yeah,
the what is it called? Like, the bands where you're, like, literally playing,
Rock
like,
Band or
yes, the
whatever, yeah,
garage band or rock
yeah,
band, all of
yeah,
that. So I never played an instrument, so I was like, "Ooh,
yeah,
I'm playing a guitar." I'm, like, playing on the drums, like, so these are things that I started to see about myself, and then obviously, like, I love Mortal Kombat, and I love,
hey,
like, Street Fighter, I still
gotta
do till
gotta,
today.
yeah.
Like, when I go to an arcade, like, I will gun it for, like, Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter and just, play that. But here in my household, like, my husband's a huge gamer, so
Yeah,
he's playing more games that are very much storytelling. And then I
okay,
get very like, what's this about, right?
yeah,
And then I think that that's kind of like what's capturing me nowadays about gaming. I think there's one that's coming out about, like, saving feral cats, I think. I think there's one that's coming out, I think I read about it, where you're saving cats and then bringing them home and then nursing them back to health, and I'm like, "That is
okay,
such a cute game because 'cause I'm a cat
yeah,
lover." You know what
okay,
I
yeah,
mean? Like, and I
there
was just
you
like,
go.
"Oh, I
Yeah, it
can."
don't always have to be a mega game, that's for sure, yeah. I don't necessarily watch too much of it on TV, but I like the HGTV stuff, so I play a lot of House
Okay,
Flipper and stuff like that,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah. Or even, when you're, like, into cooking, right? And then you're just
Yeah,
kind of like,
yeah,
"Alright," Fruit Ninja was, like, my
yeah.
jam.
Nowadays, you can get cussed out by Gordon Ramsay on the cooking show, yeah. There you
So,
go.
it's all these amazing, like, experiences that you can have in gaming, and you can just
Yeah,
basically take a little bit of your, like, actual true life,
yeah,
kind of, like, marry it into gaming. Like, the very first VR game that I actually, like, was into, and it's because, well, obviously, I got started at Oculus, so
right, yeah,
they put on, they put on an Oculus, like, headset on me and was like, "Okay, how do you feel about this?" And then they put on Henry, and it was the cutest story, and I remember crying under my VR headset because Henry was a cute little porcupine, and it was his birthday, and no one would come near him for his birthday because he was a porcupine, and he was
yeah,
scared that, he'd, like, prick people. So people brought him, like, cake and balloons and things like that, and they're just like, "We can't give it to him because he is literally, like, going to pop these balloons or he's gonna ruin the cake," and I don't know, for some reason, I got very, like, into that story, like, "Oh
yeah.
my god, poor Henry, like, no one wants to be his friend." So, it was just one of those cute experiences that it still stays with me till today. That was my first experience in VR, and then obviously trying out all the different games, like the Star Wars games or, like,
Mhm,
even Face Your Fears where I could
yeah.
last 2 minutes, you know what I mean? Like, it's just amazing how immersive those experiences were. And then that love of immersion, like in those type of spaces, I think really grew inside of me that I wanted to create immersive experiences for others.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily in VR, but, like, just in general. Like,
Yeah.
just in real life. I wanted us to basically be able to understand why we were doing these events, understand why we were being a part of these experiences, and really just kind of feeling it, right?
Mhm.
That whole see, touch, feel, smell,
Yeah.
all of our senses being stimulated at an experience.
When it comes to games, like, that was never really, uh, front of mind for me as far as, like, you can do this as a career, you can do anything within it. I just knew people make games and people play games, and that's sort of, the end all be all. And now here we are years later, and we got VR, we got AR, we got all of these different things, different type of games, RPG, storytelling. I think that is just all sort of connected in a way. It was already, like you said, it was kind of already there, but it's like, how do you sort of put those pieces together? It's like a puzzle, right? With the things that you do, like, what does that look like for a lot of the groups? Obviously, they might know that they have their own little community, but they might still feel like isolated from
Mhm.
certain events or certain things that they might just not do simply because they're like, well, I don't feel like we might be accepted here or things like that.
Mm,
Like, what do you
mhm.
think is like happening now? The more people, I guess, start to understand things, I guess, the more knowledge they get of different, things, the communities themselves actually speaking up for themselves and saying, hey, this is actually what we stand for. This is what we are, things like that. Like, what is sort of that trajectory been like as you kind of started to like now?
So I think the important thing to understand about events and experiences is that you can put an event together and just put it together like as if you're just like building a super basic cake, right?
Hmm.
However, I think that the lack of communication sometimes from people or whatever can come from maybe a lack of trust, maybe a lack of feeling like they actually have a voice. So just kind of opening up spaces and just being able to say like that it's your safe space, right? That this is a place where you can actually like say how you're really feeling. So thank God for Trinidad or whatever, basically giving me a platform for a few years where we had like a monthly conference call. At first, it was for diversity, equity, and inclusion, kind of like change makers, where they got on the call and they were able to basically like talk or ask questions about how they can be proper change agents for the communities that they supported. And I think that that opens up a lot of floodgates, right? Different conversations like took place. But then what we started to see is that once people stepped out of like their title, again, that feeling of a lack of community, right? So if they lost their job, did they still feel like they had a voice? Or did they feel like their mission could still carry on in the same fashion? And I think that's when we kind of had to revamp things a little bit. So then, you know, with her blessing, like I changed it to hashtag I need a minute. And then hashtag I need a minute became much more than just about DEI and inclusion and welcoming and belonging. What does mental health, well being, and healing look like for these communities as well? So we have yet to bring it back just based on just like schedules and everything, but I fully intend to still bring that back. But again, another revamp needs to take place because those people who were in gaming before are not in there anymore, but
Yeah.
yet they are still very much welcome. So, long story short, I think it's just about asking those questions like, what do you need right now? And why do you feel like you need it? And how can we all best support or be a resource to kind of like bring that to life? Again, I think these events and experiences are amazing, but we need to listen to each other. Like, for
Yeah.
example, if there's a lack of representation in Asian American, like, games or whatever, and the reason for the lack of representation is because we are being depicted a certain way or we're stereotyped a certain way, well, we're basically telling you that there's a problem, right? So a producer who actually has listened to us is not going to basically put together an event or experience where they're showcasing games that are nothing but stereotypical Like,
Right. Yeah.
right? Stereotypical story types about Asian Americans. That means you didn't listen. That
Right.
means you basically said, "I'm just gonna put together an event just for hell of it." Oh, so it's same thing like for, the LGBT, Q plus IA communities. Are we listening to them? Are we listening to the Black communities? Are we listening to the Latinx communities? Are we listening to each other when we say that there is an issue? I think that that's the first step. So sometimes having anonymous surveys are also something really great so that people can be honest and feel like they're not being put on the spot, which is something that, I'm a huge advocate of is being able to still speak your mind, but not necessarily having to tell like the whole world how you're feeling because sometimes we feel like we have to sugarcoat things or we might maybe have to hold things back.
Yep.
So anonymous surveys are really great or just a way for people just to kind of like drop their thoughts or feelings and then just creating those experiences off of that. So I want to go back to Control Unite for a minute because I think that these were problems that we were already hearing about why people were not feeling welcomed or feeling included at places like, GDC. It was expensive.
Yep.
It wasn't accessible as it used to be. It's all about, like, sometimes who you know and, like,
Yep.
what you can actually, like, bring to, I guess, the organizers and things of that sort. And you know what? It doesn't mean that they weren't welcome, like, in the actual space. They just didn't have what, was supposed to be on a checklist according to
Mhm.
GDC. So, Control Unite was honestly, like, created because we still wanted those people to come to San Francisco. We still wanted them to network and be able to be around their peers or be around people that they considered mentors or be around the companies that they needed to still basically, like, have access to, but they just couldn't do it by dropping K, 80K.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but, like, in this economy, we don't have that just lying around. But
No, not
right?
at all.
But we still wanna be in the room where it happens. We
Right.
still wanna be in those spaces and say, like, "I was a part of this and, like, I felt empowered to be there," and all of this, all of those, like, positive things. So, Control Unite was created again, with, like, with who we had at AAPI in gaming, and then we reached out to, Elaine and Latinx in gaming and Trini and, her crew for for Black in gaming, and we all knew we had so much going on GDC week. We knew that. But we focused on can we take one day out of our busy schedules and just say, "Hey, community, we hear you and here's a solution." And we welcome everyone. Anyone who feels like they need that space, like we got you.
Mhm.
So, I think that again, it was just a matter of for years we heard all of these issues that were taking place and then we just said we were done just listening and we were just like let's put some action towards it. So I'm really proud that we got to put our very first one out there, this past GDC and we're planning on bringing it back even bigger for the next one.
Dope. You brought up mental health and all of that stuff, and it doesn't really get talked about a lot in gaming simply
Mm,
because gaming a lot of times is used to kind of combat that, I guess, or a
yeah.
lot of people try to use it as, that outlet or whatever. But
Yes.
as someone who is in my position who games, but now gaming is more of a it's more work to me than it is fun now, I guess, in a way, simply because, I got podcasts, I got things I gotta do that. But there is a mental health aspect of, I mean, some days I'm tired. I don't want to do no interviews. You know what I mean? Like you get
1000%.
burned out.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
there's a lot that goes into, the gaming space, with that. And so like I wonder how you, I guess, go about combating that or, figuring out how to sort of rework it simply because a lot of people look at it from very extreme points of views to where like it's like you have to kind of get everybody in some minutia to be able to kind of figure out, hey, we need to do this. Hey, we need to maybe take a step back and figure out what's what. How would you go about like trying to address it, especially like with the next question I was gonna have with like social media, you being a social media manager and stuff and like kind of how all of that ties into it. Like what would be like a mini solution from you like with that type of stuff?
So I am no expert in mental health and
Yeah.
well-being. I am just someone that has gone through it herself.
Mhm.
And now being able to actually talk about it and talk about what actually transpired to get to that point, to get to the darkness point and then to actually like come out from all of that. I think that being able to talk about that is like the first step, at least it was for me. So I took those experiences and kind of said, I wonder how other people are feeling too. So, for example, when things were so volatile, like in the gaming industry, and people were getting laid off left and right, like I started to ask the questions like, how is everyone, like, especially on the conference calls, like, how is everyone feeling? And not about like, "Oh my god, I'm, like, feeling this kind of way about, like, my job search or anything." It wasn't even about that. It was like, "How are you personally feeling, like, yourself today?" And they're just like, "I'm feeling depressed," or "I'm feeling really low," or "I'm so scared." It's being able to actually, like, hear people say what their struggles are, and again, you're not necessarily, like, giving them the solution, but you're kind of
Mhm.
allowing them to just like say how they're feeling, but then also acknowledge that there's a way to support people without necessarily kind of like being their therapist per se.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because if you're not someone who's like, I guess like at that level, of being like a therapist or psychologist or anything, you can at least be that ear to listen or at least offer some resources who can. So, one of the things that I was so passionate about, especially after I had gone through my mental health and well being challenges and actually coming out on the other side of it, because knock on wood, sadly, some people don't make it
Yeah.
out.
For
And
sure.
that's something we need to be able to also talk about and be open about is that there are some people who struggle so hard that they just don't feel that there is an alternate, there's an alternative for them. And yes, that's heartbreaking, but we also have to understand that that's something that's like that's normal and we do need to talk about that. So I think that being able to create these spaces and communities, even whether it be on like Discord or it be like smaller communities, like I put on these kind of like community like tea parties. So the very first one that I put on was actually the beginning of this year when I started my initiative called the Inner Lantern, which is also from AAPI and gaming, but I wanted to basically be the actual like creator of this because again, I wanted to take what I have learned and, kind of like share it. You know what I mean? Share it in a way where it's not like you're stuffing it down people's throats or anything, but sharing it in a way where you can say, like, hey, I've gone through this. This is what I can tell you you can do. And whether you hear me or you listen to me, that's on you. But at least like you have a community of people who are telling you they all understand what you're feeling too.
Yeah.
So again, the very first I guess community get together that we had was a tea party where we had a special guest therapist come and just talk. And the way that people open up when they hear that someone else is kind of on their same wavelength or they know someone who understands like what they've been going through, it really opens up so much more of a dialogue, but also a call to action for what we could do next. So I say this because I've been doing a lot of research, especially for men's mental health, because that's something that one, Carl Bernardo and I have been talking about for a while now on how we can basically create a community specifically for men to talk about mental health. Because I mean, I don't think I need to tell you that it's not something easy and it's not something you find easily too. I'm going to be
No.
very honest with you. In digging about men's mental health, especially here in the Bay Area, they're disguising it as like walking clubs or like hiking. Isn't that crazy? I mean, like, I got to do a little bit of digging to find that out, but they don't call it men's mental health gathering. They call it like men's walking club,
Yeah.
men's, like hiking club. And then I was just like, okay. So I see that it's being talked about. It's just not being addressed so directly, the
Yeah.
same way that maybe women are, talking about like it's just literally called like a women's mental health
Yeah,
room. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So this is something I was thinking about, and I'd love your thoughts on this actually. So, because gaming is something that's very community driven, especially like for men, I was actually thinking of putting together like a gaming get together, but it is about mental health
yeah,
for men. But it's also a way for them to play games and to also just kind of like connect on that level in a safe
yeah,
space. This is just for men. And if you guys choose to talk about things, that's great. But at least it's creating a sanctuary where you all feel safe doing what you love. That's a lot of people that, do game
yeah,
for
for
mental
sure.
health.
Yeah,
You just said
and I
it
mean,
yourself.
a lot of it from the mental health side of it is you kinda have to get to a point to where because nobody's gonna do it for you, nobody's gonna do the
Right.
work for you, so
Right.
at some point, you have to get to a point to where you are comfortable enough with yourself to say, "I need some help, and I
Yes.
need to figure this out A, B, and C." Now the part about where creating a community in a game, basically a game jam, like a mental health game jam, pretty
Yeah.
much. That would be pretty cool. From your standpoint, it would be kind of normal because I guess you would just be setting up an event and getting people organized and stuff like that. But as far as like the people that are there, it would kind of be a lot of it would be up to them because
Yes. Yes.
if you don't want to share, you don't want to share. I mean,
You don't
that's
have, and you
perfect.
don't have to. If you decide that you want to and, like, the person sitting next to you is playing, I don't know, maybe the same game that, like,
Hmm.
that you're kind of, like, gravitating to, and then you decide to talk about things,
Yeah.
at least it's a good first step.
They might not necessarily be the first person that'll spill their story to somebody, but they might hear somebody else's story. My stuff ain't as bad as theirs. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
some people, will kind of hear some things of like, well, I could have, I thought this, my thing was the worst thing in the world. And, it's really fairly minor in the grand scheme of things. And it just kind of gets the wheels turning and stuff. So I think events like that would definitely go over. It would just, you would have to, the people that are a part of it would actually have to take it serious for themselves. It would have to
100%.
be.
So, yeah, I'm having conversations with different people who work in those spaces right now and who
Hmm.
also are very much like a part of like the gaming community to see how we can marry both and like do it in a way that's still very intentional but also like effective.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm always like
Right.
trying to learn and just trying to just like grow from like I don't know, like why was an event successful from the past? Okay, it was successful because of this. But now if we add in this element, can it still be successful, but can it also be impactful? Can it also like create intent? So I think that it's always asking those questions. And now, because of the fact that I'm so passionate about the mental health and well-being side of
Hmm.
everything, because
Yeah.
I feel like everything ties to our mental health and well-being and showing up for ourselves as well as for
Hmm.
others. You know what I mean? So that's just something that's just, and I don't know, just kind of gets thrown in like
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even when I'm planning or producing an event, I honestly do ask questions that tie into mental health and well-being, like such as if I have an event and I am not an introvert or extrovert, I'm just someone that kind of just like, also just vibes off of like current situations. Like, how will I feel in this space? Will I need to kind of like take myself away into like a quiet spot because I'm like overloaded with so many different things? Or is this somewhere where I feel also like open to meeting new people? Or do I want to go play a game by myself or, kind of take myself over here to the side, but still be a part of some conversations when I feel like I want to be a part of it? And again, those are mental health questions that we also need to ask. Like, is someone who is struggling, are they going to feel like they want to come to an event like this and still be a part of like the experience, or are they going to be like, no, because I'm feeling this way and it's just going to be another community that I'm not going to feel welcomed. So again,
Yeah.
it's all these different things that we have to think about when we're creating these spaces with intent, is that we have to ask all of these questions and just make sure that you're never going to please every single person, but if you make a difference for at least one person in that room, then that means you were successful. That's how
Yeah.
I see it.
Being the social media person for a music artist, obviously I'm interested in that. But that game has changed a lot.
100.
So Talk a little bit about that because I can just speak on like my start as an artist and then sort of now the reason why I'm doing this podcast, the reason why I am a part of, the different community stuff is because like you can't just be an artist anymore. Like those days are kind of over with.
Yeah.
And so like what has sort of the change and sort of the evolution of like social media and all of that stuff sort of been?
So honestly, what I love about Troy Boy especially is that he is probably one of the most authentic people that you will ever, ever, ever meet. Anything that you see on his social, anything that you see about him like online, that's his true self. And I think that that's something that separates him from a lot of other artists where they're just kind of like trying to conform to like what's popular, what's trendy, like, what works for like my audience. Like, yes, those are things that are like super important when you're doing social media or marketing or anything. You want to touch those audiences 100%. However, you still want to basically say to yourself that this is who you truly are. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something that I've been able to really like take with any of the marketing campaigns or any of the social media that that we put together or post or anything is that we always ask like, does this sound like him? Is this really true to who he is? And also another thing too is like we involve him. So like if we have ideas, and when I say we, it's like, me and like, the rest of the team or whatever, like if we have an idea for something, we always ask Troy like his input. We always say like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And then if he says like, "Hey, can we, maybe alter this a little bit?" We listen. We don't say like, "Nah, we're just going to do it." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Cuz that's also another thing too, like being a representative of an artist, you want to make sure that their voice is definitely heard and is definitely acknowledged. And I think that
Yeah.
that's something that makes our team and him so successful. We listen to each other. We communicate. He's very open, like with all of us. And like I said, he's just the most amazing, like human that you could ever, like, pretty much like know and also like, yay, work for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's become family. Um, he's definitely like someone who I have seen in this last like decade, like grow so much as an artist. And
Hmm.
if you look at his social media, it is very much he is true to who he is, and his followings are, like his followers following, it's all authentic. And I think that
Yeah.
that's something that we all basically like pat ourselves on the back for is that,
Yeah, as
yeah,
you should. The social media game, like I said, it's always changing. And like you said, the authenticity and all of that stuff is definitely at the forefront. But then, like, at the same time, it's like it's just so much. Like, it's just like, it's almost like just brain overload after a while. And so, uh,
1000%.
being able to click with your audience and being able to actually get that message through is, I mean, paramount, really. Cause I mean, that's kind of really the only way that things are kind of going to get through. Like when I first started music and just like thinking of all the things that I was thinking of, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, to like now it's like, it's even more vast, but like it's in different spots and in different ways now. So it's like I can write music all day, every day, but I mean, have to think about all these other parts if I want to, really, because I mean, at that point, I'm just writing music for myself and I can do that, whatever. But social media to me, I'm as an artist, you kind of have to play the game, obviously, and
Yes,
stuff. But I won't lie to you, as an artist, I've never really been a huge fan of social media. I always did it just because you have to
you
and stuff
have
like that.
to. Yeah.
But I've never was really a fan of it just simply because I think for a long time social media made you be unauthentic in a way,
Mm,
which it kind of is a lot of that in a lot of ways. You look at Instagram, you look at TikTok or whatever, and it's just a whole bunch of just scrolling, just unreasonable expectations and
yes,
just fake
yes,
stuff and just all of these different things, and being authentic and being able to get that message and actually push it to your audience
yeah,
is a very unique skill that not a lot
yes.
of people have. And the game changes like every year. It's something new, something different. And so like how do you guys like stay on the cusp of what is, current, what is sort of coming up and all these things, but also staying, authentic and true to the message?
Like we're looking at TikTok trends and we're looking like, what looks good and what's actually making waves and things like that. But then we kind of flip it to, "Okay, but how can we make it so that he's still bringing his authentic self to, to
Hmm.
these campaigns or these videos or anything like that?" So like for example, oh, okay. So, just seeing the excitement of like a fan, for example, right? Like maybe getting like a special surprise, like at a show or, being like upgraded to VIP or something. There's something
Mhm.
so beautiful about the way an artist interacts with their fans. And one of my favorite videos was actually when Troy just went to go get boba at, like, the Metreon or whatever in San Francisco, and he actually noticed, the cashier wearing his shirt or
Oh,
whatever,
that's
like,
cool.
from the
Yeah.
tour the night before, and I just remember him going up to her and being like, "Hi," and of course she was like,
Yeah.
like, "I was at your show last night,"
Yeah.
and just seeing the excitement in her face and just, his excitement too, seeing like one of his fans, like,
Yeah.
basically making his boba drink. Like
Yeah.
there was something so beautiful about that. And so I love seeing the fan interaction like with him because he just loves his fans so much that a lot of the content that we like to use is also just things in real time, like real life, like
Yeah.
how are people vibing to his music at like a festival or a concert? How are his fans interacting when he's just like walking by or just like shaking their hand or anything like
Yeah.
that? So those are the content pieces that we like to show as a
Yeah.
team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that we like to drive
Mhm.
because it's very much him. There's no
Yeah.
editing, there's no, it's just him, just being him.
That's dope.
And I think that
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of artists like should do. I mean, yes, of course we're looking at all these different TikTok trends, like TikTok dances, things like that, but
Yeah.
you know what? Let them create. Let
Right.
those TikTok creators create what they think will look good with, I don't know, a new piece of music that he's like coming out with or his new album or something. We want to see how people use their creativity and use what they love to do. This
Yeah.
is their way of
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
like, putting themselves out there. So who are we to basically dictate, like, "Hey, you should do it like this." No. You create and you vibe with it, and then obviously, like, hopefully, like, someone will see it and be like, "Oh, I vibe with that too," and then they're
Yeah.
gonna basically do it, and so on and
Mhm.
so forth. That's how trends are happening, right? On,
Yeah.
like, social media. But I also feel you on, like, sometimes things can be so overwhelming and inundated, like, I can't even tell you all the content at Coachella that I was watching, and I was like my head was hurting after a certain point because I was like, "Look, I get it. There's ways to sneak into Coachella, but I also don't need to
Yeah.
watch, like, 50 videos on, like, how you snuck into Coachella or how you get upgraded to an artist pass or how you don't have this access or this access. Those things are disheartening. You know what I mean? And it takes away from, like, what the true experience, like, should be. A fan going to a festival and actually just, like, immersing themselves in that experience. All the bells and whistles, amazing. If you get invited to that, more power to you.
Yeah.
But who are people to say, "I have it like this, but you don't,"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just like, "Damn," and
I
again,
spent
there's that whole mental
5 grand
health
to
thing that
eat
happens,
on
and then
a
the cycle
on a
continues.
paper plate at Coachella. I paid 5K for that and you can't, so yeah,
Yeah,
that type of thing.
it's things like that that I do watch, but then I'm just like, "Oh." I don't ever wanna get to a point in my
Yeah.
life where that's the message. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? The message should
Yeah.
be, "I love this artist, I vibe so hard with this artist, and this was my experience." It doesn't matter on what level, but this was my amazing experience.
What is next for you? Are you sort of like, is your palette full? Like, do you have everything that you kind of wanted to do? Do you have anything that you still sort of want to do? Like, what does the sort of near future look like for you with all the stuff you've done already?
PI Heritage Month in May.
Okay.
So, I will be on a few panels and our organization is doing some really amazing things like a possible game jam. We're also kind of like doing some things on our Discord. Again, it's still very much in like program phase or whatever. But I have some amazing co-founders that also just like, put their heart and soul into like our org and also find ways for us to partner up with different communities and different organizations. So we're definitely still continuing to do that. Actually got brought on to produce the BIPOC gaming conference that's taking
Okay.
place in January in Miami, courtesy of Professor Lindsay Grace. So I'm really excited for that. So definitely on the path to doing that. And then obviously we are going to go back to GDC in, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying 2027. So, already in planning mode for that, with again, AAPI in gaming and Latinx in gaming and Black in gaming and whoever else wants to join in,
Yeah,
please let us
no
know.
doubt.
For Control Unite Part 2, continuing on with the different connections and partnerships that we've been building on. And, we also have, I believe it's like the Game Workers Conference, which is, I believe, the union that's being, that was basically created and also premiered at GDC. So we're going to be helping out with that. But
Okay, cool.
yeah, so on the gaming side, that's what's going on. I'm still producing events for different tech companies as well as just, personal kind of like clients and things of that sort. So that's kind of what's going on like this year, to be honest. But
Cool.
yeah,
Very
I mean,
cool. I mean, busy. It
the
sounds
plate's
busy to
always
me.
full.
If people want to, find you, find the things that you're doing, all the communities and whatnot, plug it all. This is the plug
Plug it
moment.
all.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on Instagram, we have AAPI in Gaming. On LinkedIn, we have AAPI in Gaming. We have our website. So please look us up, AAPI in Gaming. It will break down all the different chapters that we have. It breaks down all the things that like we're involved in. Also our brother, sister organizations that we partner up with. We're definitely huge advocates of just because it's our community does not mean it's your, doesn't mean that
Hmm.
it stops there. So, let's all help each other out. Everyone can have a seat at the table. Also, the Inner Lantern is also on Instagram. That's something that I'm going to start building up a little bit more this summer with some different activations and things of that sort, maybe some movie nights. That could be
Okay, there we
fun.
go.
And yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place because it kind of lists all the things that I do, kind of sort of.
That's where all the cool kids hang out is
Yeah.
LinkedIn for sure.
Honestly feel like that's where all the cool kids have been hanging out. And please also, follow Troy Boy. He's such an amazing artist. So at Troy Boy Music. So follow along on Instagram. And yeah, he will be coming out with a new album soon enough. So
Nice,
yeah.
very nice. That's cool. Yeah.